Hello everyone, Paisley here. Today's video, I want to tackle on a very common yet complicated question of where should I settle next? To answer this question, we actually need to talk about a few different key concepts. So in this video, I'm first going to go over the difference between a town and a city because that's going to impact your decision. And then we'll go over certain restrictions like connections that you need to keep in mind. And throughout the whole video, I'll talk about strategies I use to decide where to settle next myself. So in Civilization 7, there are three types of settlements: a capital, a city, and a town. We've already discussed the importance of a capital in both my buildings and specialist video, so make sure you watch those. But here I'll just say that your capital gets the palace in its center tile, whereas cities and towns get city halls. Yes, it's a little confusing that both towns and cities get city halls, but I mean, what can you do? So let's move on to your second settlement. As soon as you settle it, it's going to be a town. Towns cannot use production to make things. It can only use gold to get buildings and units. There are restrictions in the type of buildings that you can purchase in towns. You can get warehouse buildings like your granary or your brickyard. You can get religious buildings like the altar in Antiquity Age and the temple in Exploration Age. And you can get one wall around the city hall tile. In the modern age, you can also get ports, rail stations, and factories. And you can always get bridges on rivers as well. You can also buy unique improvements in towns like the Hawit you see here belonging to Aksum, or the Han and Ming walls, or just the ones you get from city-states. A city, on the other hand, can produce buildings and units, which is what makes it so strong. Instead of investing an empire-wide resource like gold, a city can basically invest in itself. But there are some drawbacks to having cities. First of all, you purchase a city by converting a town into one, and that will cost gold. The price will scale with every new city you add. So your first city will be a certain amount, and then the second one will be more expensive, and the third one even more, up to a maximum cap, depending on the age. But keep in mind, it is cheaper to convert towns with higher population into a city, which means, for example, if I buy the altar here in this town, it now costs 600 gold to convert, whereas before the altar it was 650, and that's because buildings add population to settlements. So you see here I have 3 urban population because I have the city hall, the altar, and the fishing key, and then I have 5 rural population. Now the other major drawback to converting towns into cities is that with the last patch, every new city will add 10% production and gold cost to buildings in all other settlements. Let me give you a demonstration of what that means. For example, the bath here takes 225 production to build, and we should also check in a town. Altar here takes 99 production to build, or 344 gold. Now let's convert mass state. And now we can look at the bath. It is 243 production, and in this town it is now 108 production, or 372 gold to purchase. So you want to be a little bit careful about the timing and amount of cities you make, because it can be really devastating to your production in your capital, for instance. In general, in Antiquity Age, I like to aim for about 3 cities, but I will wait once my capital has really set itself up and has a good amount of production to start making cities. But at the same time, because it is cheaper to convert towns with more population into cities, you want to be settling the spots that you've marked out for cities first, even though it's going to take a while before you actually make it a city, so that it has time to grow. So what should you look for when settling a city? Well, I think there are 2 really important factors. First is high adjacency spots for culture and science buildings. If you saw my buildings video, you know, for example, mountains give adjacency bonuses to culture buildings, so that's why I have a monument planned here next to 2 mountains and a natural wonder. Or for example, you want to find bonus resources surrounding a single tile for your science districts. So you see here I have a library between 2 resources, giving it +2 adjacency. Spots like this will make really good cities, because ultimately what matters the most is culture and science. Secondly, you want to try to find a place with high production. So that means looking for resources with mines like I've done here, or rough terrain, or even woodcutter, meaning vegetated terrain can be okay, but rough terrain will give you the maximum production. I should put a caveat in here that production is a little bit less important in Civ 7 than it was in Civ 6, and that's because of resources. You can support a new city by moving around resources like tin, which gives 2 production in cities, or for example, hides and cotton and sheep. All of these resources that can provide production can really help support a city. So while rough terrain is important, if you have good resources, then you can sort of lower its importance in your decision making. I don't prioritize food as much for spots that I know will be cities in the future. That's because towns can provide their food to cities. However, there are a few conditions you need to meet for this to be true. First of all, the town must be specialized for it to provide food. So let's say we make a resort town, then your food is sent to connected cities. And that's the second part of the conditions you need to meet. They need to be connected to the cities to actually send food. And you can't just rely on roads to know if it's connected or not. I would highly recommend you get the City Hall mod that tells you what exactly is and is not connected. So for example, this town of Matara is connected to Axum and Lalabella and Maste, so it's going to split its food between these 3 cities once it is specialized, not right now. It is currently converting its production to gold. That doesn't depend on specializations. And we can see that when we go here under gold income, and then we see in the list converted from production +7, and we have 7 production. So that part happens immediately, but the food does not get sent until you specialize. So now that you know what to look for when settling potential cities, what should you look for when settling towns? Well, generally I like to fill in the vicinity of my empire with towns, and I look for resources first when deciding where to go. I should mention, because I'm playing Axum, I also need to be coastal because I get benefits to being coastal as Axum, and make sure you look at your certain civilization or leaders' abilities to know if there's any unique situations you need to keep in mind. Otherwise, everyone benefits from a cotton resource, for example. Camels are also really great because they allow you to have more resources in cities. Over here, I prioritize getting silver because I find that it's still really strong, especially as a person who plays wide games. Things like silk, 10% culture, and incense, which is 10% science, are less important to prioritize because that's going to be stronger later on in the era versus in the beginning of your game. Flat bonuses like 2 culture for mangoes is better at the beginning of the game. So I try to prioritize things like that when settling. And then secondly, you need to think about what kind of specializations you're interested, and that can also help decide where to settle towns. So let's take a look here. I really like trade outposts because, like I said, I prioritize resources, and you get +2 happiness for each resource tile in this town, plus +5 trade route range. These are really strong for someone who likes to go over the settlement limit because your settlement limit caps at -35 happiness, and that is not per age, meaning once you go over 7 settlements of your limit, then you're not actually getting any negatives for just settling more and more. The penalty to having negative happiness is also kind of weak. For every negative happiness, you lose 2% of local yields. Not empire-wide yields, not the numbers you see on the top left, but only local yields, what you see under Matara. Meaning if I was -8 happy, I would be getting -16% to 20 food, -16% to 7 production, and etc. Meaning the town, even at an unhappy state, would still be a net benefit to my empire. So really take this settlement limit with a grain of salt. Obviously, having a negative multiplier to any town or city is not going to be good, even if it is just local, but you can just keep settling and settling, and I'm assuming this is going to change. Actually, I know this is going to change, and that's because happiness is really manageable through certain specializations, like resort towns give you a happiness on rural tiles that already have happiness. So what makes a rural tile have happiness? Well, there's this thing in this game called appeal. It's not talked about a lot. Any adjacent appealing tile provides benefit to the tile that is next to those adjacent tiles. Does that make sense? So for example, this cotton here has 1 happiness, and that's because when you have at least 3 appealing tiles next to this tile, it will give you 1 happiness per age. So coastal tiles, vegetated tiles, river tiles, and mountain tiles provide appeal. If you have 6 appealing tiles, it won't make a difference. It is maxed at 1 per age. There's something wrong with the math here, right? The happiness penalty is capped at -35 in every age, but your rural tiles will increase their happiness every age. So go ahead and oversettle and just manage it through specializations and rural tiles. Just a quick look at the other specializations here. I don't think mining towns are very good, and that's because towns really should have more food rather than production. If you've ever tried settling a mining town in Civ 7, then you'll quickly realize that after the 4th or 5th population, all placed on predominantly production tiles, it becomes really hard to grow at all. Do I like fishing towns or towns specifically focused on growth? Not really, because once you pick up the resources, then you can probably find enough food tiles to just make a high food producing town. Food is important, but you don't need to think about it when settling. There's also kind of a major opportunity cost when picking fishing or farming towns. Let's talk a little bit about urban centers. So urban centers allow you to purchase tier 1 buildings in towns. So at the top of the video, I said towns can only get warehouse buildings and certain exceptional buildings. With an urban center, it can get, for example, the monument, the library, barracks, things like that. Why is an urban center good? Well, now that cities are nerfed, an urban center can be a great way to just grab the monuments and the library and then go back to growth while still getting the benefits of those buildings. So now that you know what to look for when settling towns and cities, the next thing we need to discuss are other limitations to finding settlement locations. The major one is connections. This is a very complicated topic. I'll try to make it as simple as possible, but sometimes I don't even understand why a town is not connected to a city. But let me try my best here. To connect a town or a settlement to your capital, it needs to be within your trade route range. So if you look at trade range, it's 10 tiles in antiquity, 15 tiles in exploration, and 20 tiles in modern. However, you need to keep in mind these are tiles you can traverse. So meaning impassable terrain such as mountains or natural wonders may block routes if there's no alternative path. So basically, if this Axum and Maste was separated by a mountain range, you need to go around that mountain range and make sure it's within trade route range. That is usually 10. However, I am playing Xerxes here, who gives an additional 10 range. This should not be affected by continents, meaning land route range should not be affected by continents. However, sea route range is affected by continents. In most cases, if you settle on an island off of the mainland of your empire and it's on the same continent, no matter the distance, it should and I believe will connect. So you need to check your continent's lens. There is the caveat that you must have a water building, like a fishing quay or harbor, or you need to be coastally settled. I just want to clarify in case anyone's confused here, it's 10 tiles from city hall or palace. So once I settled Maste, I could move further down and I could even move into another continent because I would be close enough within land route range. If you want to settle coastally on another continent, and it cannot connect by land, then I believe you cannot connect it, I think. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. And it's always wise to make sure you all have your connections using the City Hall mod. So for example, let's settle here off of the coast and then see who we're connected to. Nobody. And that's because I did not settle coastally. I am quite far from the rest of my empire. I'm just within range of Gulo Makeda, so those two connect. What you need to do in that situation is get a merchant, which I forgot to unlock, so give me one moment here. Okay, Let's try that again. Let's get that merchant and give me one more turn. Here we go. And then you can click this button, build a road to settlement, and then you can connect to whatever settlements are unconnected based off of your range. So I can connect to Axum here, but not, for example, Lalabella. If I convert Matata to a trade outpost, this should increase the range of that road. And you can see now I can reach Matata as well. Still can't reach Lalabella, but I don't have any other towns to specialize. And why should you do this? Well, until I actually connect a town to a city, it will not send the food. There are two other things to keep in mind, and that is your neighbors. First, independent peoples. If you're within 5 tiles of an IP, then they will turn hostile against you and send a raid. So you really want to make sure you are at least 6 tiles away, or you want to befriend that independent peoples, and then they will not get mad. All you need to do is be at this 15 mark here, so just friendly with them, and then they will not turn against you. You can settle immediately. You don't need to wait for it to become a city-state. Your other neighbors, other civilizations, you need to keep in mind their borders. So if you settle within 10 tiles of their capital, you will have -20 relationship. If you touch borders, that's going to be another minus. I can test that here actually. And let's see what happened here. Oh, it's only -10. In total, it'll be -30. And so that means you can settle close to your neighbors. It's a great way to actually reduce your relationship without using your influence, but you should be prepared for the consequences. Hopefully that's everything you need to know in order to place your next settlements. And let me know in the comments if you have any questions or concerns, because I know connections can be confusing. And let me know what questions you have that I can try to help answer in my next video. Thank you everyone for watching. See you next time.